Hello and welcome to what I'm hoping is going to be the best free Python tutorial you can find on YouTube. I am a self-taught Python programmer who now works as a data analyst and has web development experience as well, and it all started for me with Python. And so I want to share my love of teaching and Python with you. So I hope you follow along and possibly end up in a career change or just find really cool ways to express yourself creatively through Python. So what are you going to need to get started? You're going to need, well, Python itself. So you can go to python.org and click downloads and simply grab the most recent version, and it will most likely recognize what operating system you're on anyway. So click that, get it downloaded to your hard drive, and you'll be good to go. Next one we're going to install is Visual Studio Code. Now there are many types of code editors you can work in. Just think of them as, like Microsoft Word or Mac OS Pages. It's just some way to write a document, but write a coding document. And I personally use Visual Studio Code in my career and also just in my free time as well. So we'll work on that, and you'll be using pretty much the industry standard for a lot of companies. There are others specific to Python like PyCharm, which are popular as well, but we're going to just teach you the most universal one. And finally, we're going to grab Anaconda as well. So you can go to anaconda.com and you can go to free download and then download for your operating system. Now, Anaconda will come later in our learning. For now, we'll be set with the Python and Visual Studio Code. Now, once you have all those downloaded, you're pretty much done with the internet for a while, and you can go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code like I have here. When you do, you should get something that looks about like this. And so what I'm going to do is just on my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, and let me rename it, to Python tutorial. And if I were you, I would do the same thing. That way you just have a place to essentially keep your notes as we go through this course. And so we can say that we want to open a file now. We can go to our desktop and we can go to that Python tutorial and open it. And essentially you're going to see nothing inside here because we just made a new folder. It's got nothing inside of it, but this is where we're going to be putting our files, and once we put them in here, you'll see them populate in here as well. So before we start actually writing some files and start diving into Python, we're going to do a few more things inside of Visual Studio Code. We're going to, let me full screen this so you don't see my audio recording. We're going to go to this Extensions tab, and I've already installed these, but you're going to install Jupyter, so you can just search for that there. It's spelled Jupyter. You're then going to install Pylance, and then you're going to install Python. Now, I know we installed Python itself onto our computer, but we're also going to install it within Visual Studio Code. Don't ask me why, I just know it's something that I did and it helped. So that's what we're going to do: Jupyter, Pylance, and Python. So now that we've got all of that set up, hopefully you did. I know it's going to take longer than the 3 minutes you've been watching, but you're now good to go. We're going to create a new file, and that Python file, or the file we're going to make to write Python, is actually not going to be a Python file. It's going to be a Jupyter notebook. All right. Now, mine is now saying detecting kernels and select kernel up here, and you're going to want to select kernel, and you're going to want to select Python environments. And you do have a Python environment. It's the Python 3.12 that you installed right at the beginning of this video if you installed that for the first time. Now, I think even online it was Python 3.12.1. I think I downloaded this about a month ago and it was Python 3.12. But there won't be any drastic changes that we'll really encounter as we go through this tutorial. All right. Before we start writing code, finally, we're almost there. We're going to click this Untitled, and we're just going to press Save, and I guess I'll call this, instead of Untitled 1, we'll call it Part 1. Okay, So what is a Jupyter Notebook? What is this IPYND type of file, and why are we writing it? Well, a Jupyter Notebook is kind of like a living document, so to speak. So regular Python files just get read from top to bottom once, and once that file's been read, unless there's something in your Python file that's making it continue to loop or continue to reread through the contents, it's going to read it once and for all and be done and finished, which is fine when we're in production and we're done developing things. But when we're in development, we might want to work inside of what we're building. And Jupyter Notebooks provide a way to do that. So right now, this is one code cell, and I can make more code cells if I want to. And these code cells can all use the information that's already been ran in any code cell before it. It's live and living, so anything we write in this code cell, as long as we've ran this cell, could be accessed in this cell so long as we've made it accessible, which is where the power of Jupyter Notebooks really comes in handy. So it's just a great introductory kind of learning tool and a good way to kind of take notes and section them off. You can even go back after you take some notes and maybe add some markdowns like that just say introduction, and then that is not actually code, but the what underneath here in this code block is code. So we've got Markdown text, we've got Python text, and again, it's a living document that we can run small cells at a time. I mean, you can fill this up as much as you want, but you can test little chunks out one at a time and see how things go. Okay, so let's finally, with the time we have left, introduce you to the 4 main data types we deal with, and then 3 ways to store those data types that'll be super important. So the first data type that we are going to learn about are strings. And what I've just done is I've typed a string, and I could even type the string Python is cool. So this is a Python string, and you know it's a Python string because you wrapped it in single quotes. And if I run this cell, you can see I see that string printed out again for me. Not printed technically, but placed inside the console. We'll talk about that more later. You can also wrap a string in double quotes. And there's the familiar hello world that everyone feels like they have to do. So hello world. Notice that single quotes or double quotes, you still get a string. There is one special thing about that, and that's if you wanted to say, hi, I'm learning Python. That is okay to have that single quote in the middle of our double quotes. But take a look at what happens if we write this string with single quotes to begin with. Notice that we're now getting a bunch of white, kind of red underlined error text, because even though you were trying to write I'm correct, you ended the string early, so now this space between strings, Python doesn't know what to do with. It technically thinks this is one string right here, and it thinks you started another string and haven't finished it, and it has no idea what to do with these regular words in between, so to speak. So you can see that if we just wanted to type, hi, I'm David, I'm still getting that error. It doesn't know what hi is. It doesn't know what regular text is outside of these single quotes and double quotes. That's what we're going to have to come up with in Python. The last thing you can do is you can always check the type of a string by wrapping that string in parentheses and putting type in front. And type is actually a function, so we can put something into a function and we can get something out of a function. That's kind of the main idea of what a function is, something that you can put something inside of and get something else out of by manipulating it somehow. So we put a string into this type function, and the type function told us that the string was indeed a string. Now, the majority of errors we make in programming are usually silly little mistakes, and one of the biggest mistakes is not being aware of what type you have. So knowing right off the bat that you can always check the type of anything you're working with by wrapping it inside of this type function like so is a great tool to have right off the bat. All right, let's move quicker. So up next, there are numbers. So if we want whole numbers or integers rather, then you can just type an integer. And I know my font's a little small here. Can I make it bigger? I can. My font's a little small here, but one other great thing about Visual Studio Code is that you can see that our strings are always in this kind of brownish text. And notice that this number 14 is in that kind of limey greenish text. So 14, that's an integer. Also, negative 7,865 is an integer. And you can check the type by once again wrapping it in type. And there's int for integer. All right, now one other thing you might have noticed is that yes, you can, after you've made a code block inside of Visual Studio and you've ran it, you can actually go back and rerun whatever was there as many times as you want, or maybe overwrite the result of what you had before. So something to keep in mind. All right, in real life, there aren't always nice clean numbers or integers. Sometimes there are numbers with decimals or fractions. There are what we call floating point numbers, like so. So 13.2 is a floating point number. 17 divided by 3 is a floating point number. Now, what might be a little bit peculiar, watch this, is what is 15 divided by 3? And oh yeah, I guess we glossed past that. You can do basic math inside of Python. 17 divided by 3 with that slash key. Now 15 divided by 3, think about what that is and think about what type you would expect this to be. It's actually of type float, because when you take 15 divided by 3, even though it divides cleanly, Python says, hey, you just did division, so you're going to get a float, even if it works out nicely. So that's kind of interesting there, and we'll show you ways to work around that later. But we have integers, we have floating point numbers. So if it's not a just integer, if it doesn't need a 0 to be expressed, or if you don't type it in with a decimal point, then you're going to get an integer. And if you do some sort of division, or it comes with a decimal point, even if you type 15.0, I'm pretty sure, that's going to be a float because you gave it the 0.0, so now it's going to say, well, I guess you want me to care about that 0.0. Okay, there's only one last type we have to talk about, and those are the Boolean values. There's the Boolean true, and there's the Boolean false. And notice that these are now in the, I guess, Boolean blue is the way to remember them. Now, they need to be typed exactly as we wrote them, capital F or capital T, true and false. And if you don't type them that way, again, you can see we get some sort of error. And also, just to be maybe tricky here, even if we type false in these quotes, that's no longer the Boolean false, that is the string false, because, well, you wrapped it in a string, and you've got that brown text reminding you that, hey, that's a string now, that's a Boolean. So those are our 4 basic data types. Now, where can we store these data types? Do we got the time? We've got the time. We can store these in what we call lists. So we can have a list of numbers. And lists are in between these kind of square braces. Now, lists don't need to only contain the same type of value. We could throw a Boolean in there. We could throw in a string as well. So lists can hold whatever you want. They can even hold lists inside of lists. And you can think of an exhibit meme there if you want to. Now we also have tuples. Tuples look the exact same, but they are wrapped around parentheses instead. And lists and tuples are very different because lists can be modified later in your program, but tuples cannot. Whatever you put inside of a tuple is safe forever, and whatever you put inside of a list is subject to change. And there's one last data type we want to look at, which is dictionaries. So let's say I wanted to say that an apple was a fruit. Let's say I wanted to say that 7, the integer, is a number, and let's say that I wanted to say that the string yes is the same as true. Well then, that's all well and good, and I can do that within a dictionary. And dictionaries have key value pairs. So notice that lists, tuples, and dictionaries all had their items separated by commas. All right, we still have that here. But notice that dictionaries have 2 things inside of them per item. They've got a key and a value. All right, so that's really all we need to cover for this first video. I'll see you in the next one.